Welcome to our first video of Recipe Repair Shop Unscripted. Today we're going to cook beef short ribs, and that is something we've been practicing due to COVID because we're at home, we got time, and we can do low and slow barbecue all day long. So let's talk about this first segment, which will be preparing the beef ribs. But first a word, how did we come up with Recipe Repair Shop? Well, as I was learning to cook, I would follow recipes, and sometimes when they came out badly, we had to deconstruct what went wrong. And it could have been simple. It could have been too much salt, too little salt, too much of something else, too little of something else, or it could have been bad preparation from the learner. But what I learned over time is not all recipes are perfect, and even good ones might need a little tinkering, hence the Recipe Repair Shop. So my theory on life is food should taste good to you and your family, and if you're going to read one recipe, read 5 and then figure out what you want to do. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get ready for some ribs, and these are called beef short ribs. So today we're going to try to cook low and slow Texas style ribs. And so the first thing you need is some beef short ribs and a platter to put them on. A few other things we're going to need here are some rub, paper towels, maybe a little oil, and a kitchen knife. And hopefully all those will become apparent as to why in a moment. Now, why did we call this Recipe Repair Shop Unscripted? If you haven't figured that out yet, it'll probably become obvious. So, okay, so these are short ribs. They're also known as brisket on a stick. They might be different than what you've come across, because if you go to the store and ask for short ribs, they might only be this long or they might only be this long. So they've actually been cut all the way through and cut into individual segments. That's what most of us know as short ribs. But this is how they come from the packing plant. So, and this is just one rack. Typically you'll buy a package of these. There might be 2 of these or 4 of these in a package. They also can be hard to find. The grocery store often doesn't carry them. Not even every butcher carries them. Sometimes your big warehouse club might carry them. After the Recipe Repair Shop moved, we only have one warehouse club in town, and they don't carry them. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my regular dinner knife because it's not too sharp, and I'm getting under what's called the silver skin and getting that loose under the bone. And then what we're going to try to do is rip it off. So if it goes easy, you'll see the whole thing. If it goes slow, we'll be back in a minute. So the paper towel is the easiest way to grip the silver skin once you've got it loose. And let's see what we can do. Yeah, got a little bit of it. All right, this is going to take maybe a couple minutes. So we're going to stop, and I'll be back as soon as I'm done fighting with this. It's not much of a fight, really. You can see I got about half done. Okay, back to preparing the beef short ribs for slow-cooked barbecue. We've used the knife to get under the silver skin. We've used the paper towel to rip off the silver skin. It really only took a couple of minutes, but you didn't want to watch that. When we said unscripted, we did not say unedited, okay? So what else do we need to get started? One thing we need is our logbook. So I actually went back to the last few times I cooked ribs just to find out how long it took. At around 225 degrees on the barbecue, it took almost 10 hours to cook this. I think those might have been a little bit fatter and bigger ribs. So we're thinking about that. But today we're going to try something different. Remember, a recipe isn't a recipe. If meat can cook at 225, it can also cook at 275. A lot of people like to cook around 250 or 225, and that's considered low and slow. When you start getting to 275 or 300, some people consider that hot and fast. I'm going to play with it a little. We're going to try about 265 today. That'll speed these ribs up while still being slow enough that the connective tissue melts away to make them moist and juicy. The other thing I'll need later on is my remote thermometer to go along with my logbook, and I'll be able to watch the rib temperature indoors on this hot and humid day rather than going out to the grill and looking every hour. Okay, how do you prepare ribs? Couldn't be any easier. If you had a little time and these set out in the air for a while, they would be naturally a little bit juicy. See that? And therefore all I need is some either commercial or some of my own rib rub. And rib rub is as simple as SPG, salt, pepper, and garlic. And you can make your own in a leftover jar, and you can make it to any ratio that seems to work well for you. Today we're going to use a little of each, some of my commercial rub and some of my salt, pepper, garlic. This is the same way you would treat brisket, and when we get all done, if I'm lucky, I'll be able to show you brisket on a stick. Awesome. So again, to season it, all we need to do is maybe put on a little olive oil, or if your roast has been out for a little bit of while, and this has been out for maybe 30 minutes on the counter, it's already got some juices on the top. I think I'll just be able to coat it up really nice with my Brisket Style Rub. Now, Brisket Rub is different than pork rub. There's a different set of seasonings. Tends not to have as much paprika and celery salt. It might be a little simpler, salt, pepper, garlic. You can choose what you want. Again, I'm going to do some of my own salt, pepper, garlic, and some of my Brisket Rub. As you can see here, we're going to get it on fairly heavily, and we want to be able to taste this. All right, I'm going to do every edge and both sides, and then I'm going to come back. All right, so here at the Recipe Repair Shop, remember, a recipe isn't a recipe. What we've done is seasoned our beef ribs with a combination of 3 or 4 things. We used some commercial brisket rub. We used some of our own blend of salt, pepper, garlic. We'll talk about that in another show. We used some additional black pepper. The top of the roast was damp enough that the rub stuck well. The bottom of the roast, where we removed that silver skin, I put just a little bit of olive oil down first. And that's all you need for a brisket or for Texas ribs. And we're going to do one last thing to prepare these, which is insert the temperature probe. This is for our remote temperature probe. And we put that right into the thick part of the meat. And we'll be able to keep an eye on the ribs all day long while they smoke and know what's going on. In fact, at the moment, I'm checking out on the grill. It's at 213 degrees. I don't even have to go outside to look. When that gets to about 260, 265, we'll put these on. All right, so for this segment, what we're gonna do is talk a little bit about setting up a grill. What I have here is a Komodo grill, which many of you will notice by brand name Big Green Egg. I'm not here to promote any particular grill, but I will say what the features about this one I like are. So what I want to do next is give you a close-up. Okay, so here we are at the egg, which I've already been preparing. For a long cook, what's important is to fill this thing to the brim with coal. And I've also put in a combination of cherry and oak wood chunks. One thing you'll have to do if you barbecue a lot is figure out how much wood and what's a great placement for you to get the right amount of smoke. The one thing I do love about the Big Green Egg is once you set a temperature, it has baffles at the bottom and also a dial wheel for the top. Hello, smoking buddy. And you can literally set the temperature of this thing and almost walk away. I typically only have to check it every 15 or 30 minutes. So I'm going to do one more thing, which is to cheat. And I've purchased a electric thermostatic fan. And the way that works is when the temperature goes down in the egg, it blows some air in to bring it to speed, and if the temperature goes up, it doesn't blow air. And that allows you to walk away from the egg for longer periods of time, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, maybe catch a little nap. So we're going to light this here in just a second. Okay, so here we are talking about lighting your big green egg or other charcoal grill. There's really a couple, 3 ways to do this. You could put a small pellet and make a mound of charcoal in the grill, light the pellet and walk away. That's one way. Another handy way is to fill a basket like this with charcoal, newspapers on the bottom, light it and walk away. But I found a new gadget. This is the grill torch. So let's see if it'll light up today. With the grill torch, all you have to do is make a place in your charcoal basket to actually aim the fire and just light a few of the coals. Now notice I like to put my wood chunks all around, and that will give me wood smoke at the beginning and maybe later on during the smoke, and it gives me a nice rich bark on my barbecue. Alright, usually in less than a minute I already get hot coals, see that? And they'll be ready to take off on their own. And that's it. All we have to do is shut the lid for a few minutes, and then we'll come back. Alright, we're getting ready for some low and slow beef ribs today, which means we're setting up the grill to cook on indirect heat. Now if you look in here, this has been going just a few minutes and it's starting to cook. There's a nice little hot spot in there, some smoke is starting, and that's just going to keep going for a while. But a word on barbecue. Ask any 10 barbecue people what is barbecue, and you're going to get a lot of different answers. One of the favorite answers is the Texas style of low and slow barbecue, which means we're going to smoke and we're going to use indirect heat. Now if you had a Weber kettle drum, to get indirect heat you would build charcoal into 2 baskets like this on either side of your grill, and you'd put a pan in the middle. Your meat would go over the pan and the heat would come up from the sides. In a Komodo drum we have what's called a heat deflector. This is something akin to a baking stone made out of ceramic, and it goes in the egg and covers up the heat source, and then what you do is put the grill grate over top of that. Since my fire is now started, it's time to put the deflector in because it's made of ceramic and it wants to heat up with the grill. So let's go ahead and do that. I've covered the deflector with foil to make cleanup easier later. So the next step after this is waiting for the grill to come up to temperature. Today we're going to go fast at 275 degrees. We'll come back later. A word on smoke. You can see here the big green egg is just pouring out tons of smoke. This is very normal at startup, and is why we allow our smoker to take some time to come up to temp and settle down. After this billowy white smoke goes away and we've been at the proper temperature for maybe 30 or 40 minutes, and we get to a place where we have thin, clean blue smoke, we're much more ready to put our meat onto the grill and have a nice slow cooked barbecue rather than an acrid, bitter barbecue. So the grill's been going for about an hour. We now have it settled at about 269 degrees, which is fine for today. My target's about 265. And maybe you can see it, but we have just a nice thin line of blue smoke coming out. That's exactly what we're happy with for our barbecue. So now what we're going to do is come in here and set our ribs right on the grate. Notice I already have 2 thermostatic controls coming out of here. One's for the fan, one's for the remote thermometer, and now we have the new probe in the meat for the remote thermometer. So it's 3 o'clock here. We've got the oven at 245 or 255 almost, and we have the ribs at 195, and they've been in since 10 o'clock this morning. So let's see how they're doing after 5 hours. So those are perfect looking ribs. Crusty, juicy, the bones are out. It's just a matter of finding out whether they're tender and whether they are wanting to wait or whether they're ready to go into the holding bin. So let's find out. Okay, a couple ways to decide if your ribs are done. One way is to see if they are all jiggly when you wiggle them. The answer is no, these are still pretty firm. Another way is to put your probe in and see if they're completely probe tender, meaning gives no pushback whatsoever. And I've done that with these, and I'm thinking they're not quite ready yet. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and put them in a foil pan and then cover it, because we're going to capture the rest of the juices as they continue to emit juice, and then we'll give them some more time. Okay, so here we are, wrapped in foil, wrapped in a foil pan, foil lid, and ready to just finish off. Right. Now we could have wrapped these in unlined butcher paper. A lot of people are aficionados of that. I've done that with great success. We could have wrapped them in foil, done that with great success. We could have left them on there. I find that getting a little bit of that final juices captured helps keep them tender and moist. Why did we do foil today? Well, it's the Recipe Repair Shop. We just do it a little bit different every time and see whether we like it or not. And then someday maybe we'll know what perfect is. All right, probably got another hour to wait. Okay, our ribs are over 200. Just a second ago they said 201 and it flipped to 202 while I was watching. A lot of people think 203 is the magic number, but the real magic is when they're good and jiggly. So let's go find out. All right, let's take a peek. So we're going to remove the foil, and we're going to grab the rib, and we're going to go, oh my goodness. It's still sticking to the bone, not falling off, which is good, but it's much looser than it was an hour ago. I'm going to try the probe test again. Oh yeah, look, I can't even feel it going in there. Not one, oops, that one had a little bit. That's interesting because that's the smallest one. But let's just try, yeah, he's tightened back up, but up here in the middle, oh, and even over there, perfect. It's just one little spot. So these guys are definitely done. So we're gonna wrap them up and we're gonna put them in a hot cooler. I know that makes sense, or doesn't make sense, but it's a cooler filled with hot water. We're going to dump out the hot water, fill these full of towels, and just let them set for an hour or two. Okay, so the final rest of the beef ribs, we put them in a cooler. The cooler was previously filled partially with hot water to warm it up. It's been dried a little. There's towels in the bottom. We'll throw towels over the top and just let it rest. They'll be ready in an hour, and they'll hold for at least a couple or three. All right, well, here we are at the moment of truth. And since it's the Recipe Repair Shop and we like truth, you'll see it no matter what happens. So as a reminder, we put the beef into the cooler, which we have preheated to about 240 degrees. The beef has been covered with some towels. Just sitting gently for about 2 or 2.5 hours now. What we want to find out is how does it look and how does it taste. So here are our ribs, and we're going to bring them over to the cutting board. And we're gonna slice these into individual servings. And I just want you to see how tender and juicy these have turned out. And that is a big beef, not quite what they would call a dino rib, but a wonderful short rib. You've got your barbecue crust, you've got your juice, most of the fat has been melted away, and we can just keep going through these like nothing and nothing. And you have a serving for 4 different size people. So anyhow, let's see what Mrs. thinks of this. She's managing the camera, and she'll take our first bite and tell us the truth.
Heavenly.
I wish you could see her face. So in any event, thanks for joining us. Here's how you cook beef ribs on a day when you want it to take 5 or 6 hours and not 10 or 12. Happy cooking.